Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
Look, January 5th, and we're finally getting back into the rhythm of Phillies baseball after the holiday break. The winter meetings are behind us, the quiet period is ending, and we need to start getting real about what this team looks like heading into spring training. This isn't just another season. This is year 4 of what feels like an increasingly narrow championship window, and the pressure is mounting with every passing day that doesn't bring major roster upgrades. Let me start with what I think is the most important storyline heading into this season, and it's pretty simple. Can they actually win the World Series? I know that sounds broad, maybe even obvious, but think about where we are right now. This roster has the pedigree, the experience, the talent. They've got a massive payroll that ranks among the highest in baseball. They've made deep playoff runs, 3 consecutive Octobers, and come up short every single time. The expectation isn't just to make the playoffs anymore. It's not even just to win a playoff series. The expectation is championship or bust. And that's the reality everyone associated with this organization needs to embrace. Everything else is secondary to that central question. Yeah, we can talk about individual storylines like whether JT Realmuto comes back, what happens with the catching position if he doesn't, whether they make a splash move for someone like Bo Bichette. Those are all interesting subplots that matter, but they all feed into that one overarching narrative. Can this core group finally break through and win it all? Because if they can't, if we're sitting here next January talking about another disappointing October exit, then serious questions start getting asked about whether this window has closed, whether major changes are coming, whether we're looking at the end of an era. The JT Realmuto situation is fascinating because it tells you a lot about where this organization is financially and philosophically. We've been at this stalemate for weeks now. JT wants to get paid what he believes he's worth. The Phillies clearly have a different number in mind. Nobody else in the market seems eager to give him what he wants either, which suggests the market agrees with the Phillies' assessment more than JT's. My gut feeling is he comes back on a 3-year deal, something that gives him security but represents a pay cut from what he's been making. I just don't see him wanting to go anywhere else at this stage of his career, and I don't think the Phillies want to walk away from what he brings beyond just the statistics. But here's where it gets complicated. If JT doesn't come back, what does that mean for the rest of the offseason? Does it free up money to make a move for someone like Bo Bichette? John Heyman tweeted over the weekend that the Phillies are one of the big market teams interested in Bichette, which isn't exactly breaking news since we've been talking about him as a fit for months, but the reality is that adding Bichette would require subtracting salary elsewhere, probably meaning goodbye to JT and potentially trading someone like Alec Boehm to clear both roster space and payroll flexibility. I'd love to see Bichette in a Phillies uniform. The guy can flat out hit. He's a doubles machine who makes consistent contact, doesn't strike out excessively, and has shown he can perform in high-pressure situations. But I'm also realistic about the financial constraints this organization is operating under. They've got a tax bill due this week that's enormous. They're going to be over the 4th luxury tax threshold again. Unless John Middleton suddenly decided over the holidays that he's willing to pay whatever it takes and eat massive penalty taxes, I'm lowering my expectations about big splash moves happening. The more likely scenario is they bring JT back, keep the core together, maybe make some minor additions around the edges, and bet that health and performance improvements from existing players will be enough to get them over the top. Is that the exciting offseason fans we're hoping for? Probably not. But that seems like where we're headed unless something dramatic changes in the next few weeks before spring training opens. Let's talk about what I'm most curious to see this season, because there are some genuinely fascinating storylines beyond just the big picture championship question. Bryce Harper's mindset and performance is at the top of my list. Dave Dombrowski called him out publicly at the end of last season, essentially saying he wasn't elite anymore, questioning whether he could get back to that level. Harper's response has been to embrace it, literally wearing "not elite" on his chest during workout videos. That's exactly the kind of competitive fire you want to see from your franchise player. Harper dealt with wrist inflammation for a significant chunk of last season, which directly impacted his power numbers. He still put up solid production, 27 homers and 75 RBIs, but those weren't vintage Bryce Harper numbers. If the wrist is fully healed, if he's had a proper offseason to train without compensating for injury, and if he's motivated by Dombrowski's public challenge, we could see a monster bounce-back year. That would change everything about this offense and give them the kind of middle-of-the-order threat they've been missing. I'm also incredibly curious about Andrew Painter. Where is he in his development? What kind of major league pitcher is he going to be when he finally gets the call? The Phillies didn't rush him last year, which was the right decision, even if it was frustrating for fans eager to see what he could do. But at some point this season, probably midsummer, if everything goes according to plan, we're going to see him in a Phillies uniform pitching meaningful games. How close is he to being a legitimate impact starter? Can he handle the pressure of pitching in Philadelphia with playoff implications on the line? Those answers matter enormously for both this season and the future. Justin Crawford is another huge curiosity for me. He's being handed the center field job basically by default, and we need to see what he can do defensively. I'm less worried about his offensive contributions, even with the questions about his ground ball rate and approach. If he can play solid defense in center, if he can cover ground and make the plays he needs to make, that's valuable even if he's hitting 8th or 9th in the lineup. But if the defense isn't there, if he's a liability out there, then suddenly you're looking at potentially starting Johan Rojas instead, and that creates different problems offensively. Now let's get into fears, because this roster has some legitimate concerns heading into the season. My biggest fear, and I think this is probably shared by most people who follow this team closely, is that Zach Wheeler doesn't bounce back from thoracic outlet syndrome surgery the way we need him to. Wheeler has been the ace of this staff, one of the best starting pitchers in franchise history. Losing that production or getting a significantly diminished version of him would be devastating for a rotation that already has question marks. The encouraging news is that other pitchers like Mel Kelly and Brad Keller have come back successfully from similar surgeries. Keller mentioned he felt about 100% by the All-Star break, which would be a reasonable timeline for Wheeler too. If Wheeler can work his way back during the first half and then be vintage Wheeler from July through October, that's still incredibly valuable. But the fear is that he's only 50% of what he was, or that he breaks down again, and suddenly you're relying much more heavily on Aaron Nola, who showed serious signs of decline last season. Speaking of Nola, that's another major concern. He had the worst year of his career last season with an ERA over 6. Can he bounce back? Is that decline going to continue? Because if both Wheeler and Nola are significantly worse than expected, if you're not getting ace-level performance from your top 2 starters, it doesn't matter how good Jesus Luzardo is or what Andrew Painter might provide. You need your horses to carry heavy loads in the rotation, especially for a team built to win now. The broader health concerns are legitimate too. This is an older roster. The core players who matter most are all on the wrong side of 30 or rapidly approaching it. Older players are more susceptible to injury. They break down more easily. They need more rest and maintenance. Losing 1 or 2 key pieces to significant injuries could completely derail the season, and that risk increases every year as this core ages together. Let me throw out a bold prediction that I'm actually pretty confident about. Justin Crawford finishes as a finalist for National League Rookie of the Year. I know people are dumping on him right now because of his ground ball rate and questions about whether he can play center field defense. But this kid has produced at every level climbing the minor league ladder. He's shown he can hit, he can adjust, he can compete. I'm betting on him having a very nice season that opens some eyes and puts him in that top 3 conversation for rookie honors. Here's another bold take, and this one might be the boldest thing I say all year. The Phillies win the World Series. Orion Kerkering gets the save in the NLCS clincher, carries them to the championship, and Bryce Harper has the kind of postseason that cements his legacy in this city. Dave Dombrowski lifts the Commissioner's Trophy, hands it to John Middleton, and retires as a 3-time World Series champion. There's a parade down Broad Street in early November with a sea of red celebrating the first championship in this city since 2008. Is that bold? Absolutely. Is it unrealistic? I don't think so. This team has the talent. They've been knocking on the door for 3 consecutive years. They've learned from their playoff failures. The core is still in their prime or close to it. If they can stay healthy, if they get the performance they need from their starting rotation, if Harper bounces back and the lineup produces the way it's capable of, why not this year? Why not finally break through and win it all? Jesus Luzardo is another guy I'm extremely high on heading into this season. My bold prediction for him is that he finishes top 5 in National League Cy Young voting. I know that sounds aggressive, but look at how he finished last season. Once he got his mechanics straightened out and stopped tipping pitches, he was absolutely dominant. His stuff is electric. He's got confidence. He's pitching for a contract, which means maximum motivation. If he makes 30 to 32 starts and maintains anywhere close to that level of performance, he's going to get serious Cy Young consideration. The question becomes whether the Phillies start extension talks with Luzardo during spring training. He's going to be expensive, probably in that $30 million per year range on a 5 or 6 year deal. Do they want to commit that kind of money to another starting pitcher when they've already got massive commitments to other players? Or do they ride out his contract year and see what happens, potentially losing him to free agency if he has the kind of season we're hoping for? That's a tough decision, and it probably depends on what they think about the long-term trajectory of this core and whether they're planning to keep this window open or eventually break things down for a rebuild. The reality is that this organization is operating under serious financial constraints despite being a big market team. They've pushed the luxury tax limits repeatedly. They're paying massive penalty taxes. John Middleton has been willing to spend, but there are limits even for him. That's why I'm skeptical about big splash moves still happening this offseason. That's why the JT situation has dragged on. That's why talk about Bo Bichette or other major additions feels more like wishful thinking than realistic expectation. But you know what? That's okay if the players they have step up and perform. If Harper has a monster year, motivated by Dombrowski's comments, if Wheeler comes back healthy and pitches like an ace in the second half, if Nola bounces back from a down year, if Luzardo continues his late-season dominance, if the bullpen holds up and Kerkering becomes that late-inning weapon they desperately need. If all those things happen, this roster is good enough to win a championship without major additions. That's what this season comes down to. They've assembled the talent, they've built the roster, they've created the championship window. Now it's about execution, about health, about performing when it matters most in October. We've seen this team come close multiple times. We've watched them win playoff series and make deep runs. The next step is finishing the job, actually winning the whole thing, and bringing a championship parade back to Philadelphia. Everything I'm saying here is built on optimism that might not be justified by recent history. 3 straight playoff exits should probably make me more skeptical. The lack of major off-season moves should temper expectations. The age and health concerns are real and legitimate. But you know what? Baseball is unpredictable. Teams that look great on paper sometimes disappoint. Teams that seem flawed sometimes catch fire at the right time and win it all. The 2008 Phillies weren't the most talented team in baseball, but they got hot in October and brought home a championship. Can this team do the same? Can they finally break through and reward the faith that ownership, management, and fans have placed in this core group? That's what we're all going to find out over the next 9 months. That's why we watch, why we care, why we invest emotionally in this team every single season. The possibility that this could be the year that we could finally see a World Series parade down Broad Street, that decades of frustration could end with one magical October run. I'm choosing to believe it can happen. I'm betting on this roster, on these players, on this organization to finally get it done. The pieces are there. The motivation is there. The talent is there. Now we just need the execution and a little bit of luck to fall our way when it matters most. Let's see if 2026 is finally the year the Phillies bring a championship back to Philadelphia.